Hello there, wonderful people, beautiful searchers for truth and love and light and all that beautifulness. So it's the new moon today in January 2025, and this is the new moon, so it's the first new moon of the year. So the Chinese are celebrating their new year. This is the year of the snake for those who are 12, 24, 36, 48 and all that, who are jumping into that 12-year cycle. I'm sure it's relevant for some of you. Don't know too much about it myself, but what I do know a little bit about is something to do with these cards. This is a new moon reading. So this is the reading I just drew. So let's dive into some of the stories here and see what comes up. So we got the Seven of Pentacles, the Tower card, as the major arcana card, and the Four of Wands reversed. Just by simply looking at this reading, there's going to be some stories of maybe expectation, disappointment, maybe dealing with our relationship of failure, of not feeling satisfied, and a couple of ego stories jumping in there. Let's dive into some of the meanings one by one of these cards, and then we'll see them all together as well. So we've got this Seven of Pentacles, which reflects this quite an abundant harvest received by this gardener who's standing on his hoe or resting on his hoe and looking down and seeing the abundance, and yet feeling a little bit disappointed, recognizing that maybe the goal-orientated way that we see this material world is not always as productively satisfying as we would imagine it to be. So we'll have a material goal and we'll go, gosh, I really want to do this, and then we do it and we go, okay, yeah. And sometimes it's more the emotional response that we have to a completion of a story, or to the success, or to the material abundance, that doesn't seem to match the expectations or the vision that we might have had around what we thought this would feel like. And there's an aspect of that in this reading. There's an aspect of expectation and throwing our expectation out there in the world and then not having those expectations met. A lot of the expectations that are never met are the emotional ones, and that's how we expect to experience certain successful, abundant stories, or successful goals that have been achieved. And then we get this Tower card in the middle, and I'm just going to jump through these cards so we can, not spend a huge amount of time on this reading. But we've got this Tower in the middle that says, "Hey, look at all this wonderful, beautiful tower that you've built. That God comes along and destroys with an act of divine destruction, throwing us out of our tower of ego into this false tower of ego that we've become the king and queen of, or whatever." And we are jumping to our death, or to at least to the death of the destruction of this aspect of what we have constructed. And these two cards relate in that, we'll build the tower, we'll tend the garden, we'll look for the ways that make ourselves feel bigger and better and stronger. And that sometimes that tower experience relates to the false ideas or the false nature of our greatness and our relationship to greatness. So is us being great dependent upon the harvest? Is us being great dependent upon our hierarchy in the tower, or the fact that we actually built the tower and look how big and tall and phallic and massive it is and stands up on a rock that everybody can see how special we are? Is it about being recognized by the world on the outside? Is it about our ego and our fragile sense of individuality? Is it about our achievements and how those achievements are recognized by other people? Is this what dictates how we feel about success? Is this what dictates our relationship to success? Because the Tower says, hey, if this is what it's all about, then you're going to be slightly disappointed by the results, because this type of success needs to be destroyed if you're going to jump into a more successful spiritual role. Why? Just because, not because we need to lose all of our house or lose what we've built or lose our harvest or anything like that, but we need to be we need to disconnect our feeling of success from specific material outcome. So what that means is you can be a successful gardener if you just manage to get one of these fruits to ripen instead of all 7. How would that be a successful gardener? Because in that journey you've learned so much. You've probably learned more about what not to do gardening, what doesn't work gardening, what's going to muck up your whole gardening success. You're going to be humbled. You're going to realize a lot of what doesn't work so that next year you can hopefully avoid that type of failure if perchance you want to carry on gardening next year. The Tower speaks very strongly about our relationship to feeling great, feeling important, feeling taller and bigger, and the ego story that can come from that. And this material success that we're looking for is so often a representation in society and in our culture about that success. And if we don't have it, then how can anybody look at us and go, wow, you're somebody I want to emulate. Your success on a plate. You are the epitome of what I call a successful, abundant, great human being. And yet there are many different versions of greatness, and that greatness is not something that needs to be decided in a way by some of the cultural norms of society, but will be felt on an inner level. And that's where this last card comes in, and it's this 4 of Wands, which speaks about this more spiritual success, more fire-related growth, transformation, healing, purpose, intuition, connected to the light story, which we are celebrating. We might not feel like we have much to celebrate, but there's abundance in this picture as well, just as there are abundance in the 7 of Pentacles as well. There's an abundance that we're celebrating, and there might just be 4 wands here, not 7, but there's an abundance of being able to ground ourselves in a certain spiritual sense of purpose. And so if all of our work isn't grounded in that sense of purpose that we invent and bring into our lives, the spiritual purpose is something that's felt in our heart. It feels real down to the core of our being and is not subject to what somebody else told us is success or greatness, but is something that what feels deep down and true, a true greatness which we can only feel, ourselves. We might not even be seen very much in the world. We might not be recognized by anybody else, but if we can recognize our own abundance, if we can recognize how we are grounding ourselves in and following our purpose with integrity, honesty, then there's a certain celebration that we need to be able to have. And that celebration is something that will often be distracted if we buy into the norms of what is culturally decided or expected to be the norm of success and abundance. And it's a tricky one. It's a tricky one here because we live in cultures, we live in societies, we live as a part of a collective consciousness. And so to ignore that consciousness is not really the answer here, but to depend upon other people's expectations or a cultural expectation to define what is actually beautiful and great is going to be a fundamental mistake that can lead us to trying to be self-important and consequently have our tower destroyed. So in these two cards here, there's fire. This is the suit of fire, and this is the fire that's coming down and burning this material tower of ego. And in a way, if we want to really embrace our fire, we have to jump out of that tower. If we want to be grounded properly in what we might call our spiritual path, we have to be ready to die to our ego, or die to our individual greatness to a certain degree. We need to be ready to surrender our attachment to that individual greatness in order that, the need for my own personal identity to be incredibly special, in order to ground ourselves in proper spiritual celebration. Now, does this mean we can't be great? No. Does this mean we can't be outstanding beings sharing the light and standing in the forefront of society and maybe being great leaders? No, not at all. But it means that the ego won't be there with us. It means that we will have to have surrendered our egotistical attachments to being great in order to actually be grounded in the four elements, or in the four fixed structure of spiritual fire, and to be able to celebrate that beautifully, which is a little bit of a trouble in this card, which is why it's reversed, and it can only come about if our fragile ego is not involved in this story. Anyway, if any of this relates to you, if your ego wants to be special, and if we're bought into the ideas of what success and abundance is in this material world, which it doesn't mean it doesn't need to include all those things, but if it just includes those material stories, we're not going to feel the abundance, feel the greatness, and feel the consequential corresponding amazingness that material abundance should be giving us, but can never really give us, because we need to be grounded in that fire, and we need to feel that in a marriage of conscious and subconscious, feel our inner integrity with our intimacy completely connected, where our actions and our hearts are aligned. And in this moment, I think this is the only real grounding of our sense of fire in this world. And this, is definitely worth celebrating, but it won't be the same celebration as the Seven of Pentacles, that he doesn't even feel like it needs to be celebrated, even though the world on the outside might be trying to big you up and say, oh yes, how wonderful those Seven Pentacles are. No, it's great for that to happen. It's great for us to feel the praise, but if the ego becomes involved, then that praise is going to misalign us and pull us away from what is our more heartfelt goals in life. Have a wonderful New Year, Chinese New Year. Have a wonderful new moon celebration, guys, and I'd love to hear your comments. All the best.